Morning, afternoon, and evening, welcome to the Global Intelligence Report presented by OneRead.news, where we present you information from all over the globe so you remain smart. This is the OneRead. Now get ready to experience news as it should be, calm, clear, and factual. Welcome, everyone. Today we're doing something a bit different, a comprehensive look at the interconnected events shaping our world on a single day. We often see the news as just a bunch of separate headlines. An economic report over here, a conflict way over there. But today, we're going to connect the dots. We're going to trace these hidden threads that link a jobs report in America to a diplomatic ultimatum in Europe, and then see how that connects to a fragile peace deal in Africa. It's really a snapshot of a world under some immense pressure, where what happens in one corner of the globe creates these powerful and sometimes unexpected reactions in another. Okay, let's dive into this. We've structured today's global brief into 5 key themes to help connect the dots. We'll start with the economy, where a few key numbers are sending shockwaves. From there, we'll look at the world's global flashpoints, where those economic tremors can feel more like explosions. Third, we'll turn inward a bit and see how all this pressure is challenging the very idea of democracy itself. Then, we'll zoom out to the big picture, the planet of extremes we all live on, before we land on our final theme, which is really the fundamental battle for science, for justice, and for truth. Our first theme looks at economic instability and the high-stakes negotiations that follow. It begins in the United States with a jobs report that stunned economists. You see, this monthly report is supposed to be a critical health check for the world's biggest economy. But the numbers that came out, well, they weren't routine at all. They were a jolt to the system, and they sent these ripples of concern all across the globe. That's the number of jobs the U.S. added in July, a figure far below expectations that immediately sparked economic worries, 73,000. Now, you might be looking at that number and thinking, okay, so what? That sounds like a lot of jobs. But here's why it's so alarming. You have to understand that economists, they were forecasting a number maybe 3, even 4 times bigger than that. They were expecting something around 250,000 jobs. So 73,000 isn't just a miss. For an economy the size of the US, it's a sign that the economic engine is really starting to sputter. It suggests businesses are pulling back on hiring, which could mean consumers might stop spending soon. And that means the risk of a recession just got a whole lot bigger. But believe it or not, this single number was just the tip of the iceberg. The gap between what was forecast and the actual data was immense, signaling a much weaker labor market. The unemployment rate also ticked up to 4.2%. But the real bombshell was buried in the fine print of the report, the revisions. See, the government didn't just say July was weak. They went back and admitted that the job numbers for May and June were actually way overstated by a massive 258,000 jobs. It's like your doctor telling you that you haven't just caught a cold today, but you've actually had pneumonia for the last 2 months and nobody realized it. It means this weakness isn't new, we've just been looking at the wrong data. And when you have a data crisis this big, it almost always becomes a political one. This move was heavily criticized by economists who warned that it raises serious concerns about the politicization of crucial, independent government data. And the political fallout was immediate. I mean, within hours, the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, was fired. This is a huge deal because the BLS is supposed to be this island of pure, objective data in a sea of political spin. Their whole job is to just give us the facts, no matter how inconvenient they are for whoever is in power. So firing the leader right after a terrible report sends a really chilling message that the numbers better fit the political story. Economists call this the politicization of data, and it's dangerous because it just erodes trust. You start to wonder if you can even believe the numbers you're seeing. Meanwhile, in global trade, the US and South Korea struck a massive deal. And this is a classic move, right? When you have bad news at home, you try to score a big win abroad. This table brilliantly illustrates the quid pro quo. In exchange for a stable 15% tariff, which is a huge deal for South Korean companies, South Korea has committed to these massive investments in the US. We're talking a staggering $450 billion in total, a colossal injection into the American economy. But here's where it gets really interesting. The South Korean trade minister has gone on record saying that no final written agreement has actually been finalized yet. So what's going on? Was this a real deal, or was it a strategically timed announcement meant to change the headlines? This is what global trade looks like now, a high-stakes game of economic pressure and public perception. This pressure on established systems isn't just economic. It's playing out in zones of conflict, where fragile peace deals and human lives hang in the balance. We're now turning to these global flashpoints, where the stakes aren't measured in dollars or market points, but in human lives. Here, instability isn't some theoretical risk you read about. It's a brutal daily reality.
31 people, including 5 children, were killed in Kyiv in what's being called the city's deadliest assault in a year. For a city that has lived through years of war, that's become tragically used to air raid sirens, this number still managed to shock everyone. It's a grim milestone, really, and it shatters what had been a period of relative calm in the capital. It signals a terrifying new escalation in a war that just seems to have no end in sight. The U.S. response was swift and severe, issuing a hard deadline and threatening more sanctions, a major escalation that risks a wider conflict. They didn't just condemn the attack. They issued an ultimatum, a hard deadline, August 8th. That's the date Russia has to agree to a ceasefire or else face crushing new sanctions. Now, an ultimatum is a tool of last resort in diplomacy. It's a final demand that basically removes all room for negotiation. It puts both sides on a direct collision course, and that's a huge escalation, one that pushes this regional conflict dangerously close to a direct confrontation between world powers. On another front, the human cost of conflict is staggering. Since late May, over 1,373 people have been killed in Gaza while simply trying to get food aid. Think about that. These weren't soldiers. They weren't caught in some crossfire. They died trying to do the most basic human thing, get food for their families at these chaotic aid distribution sites. It's a casualty not just of war, but of hunger and total desperation. The UN's data shows the distribution system is tragically flawed. Medics on the ground are reporting that more and more people are just dying from starvation, completely separate from the violence. In the last day alone, another 91 people were killed just trying to get aid. But here's a really troubling detail that's come out. Most of these deaths are happening at these new distribution sites run by a US and Israeli-backed group, not the UN, which has been doing this for decades. It points to a catastrophic failure. The very system that was designed to save lives has become a primary cause of death. It's this awful paradox where trying to get help is now one of the most dangerous things a person can do. Now, what's really interesting is how even attempts at peace are struggling. Just a month ago, this US-brokered peace deal between Rwanda and the DRC was being called a historic breakthrough. And for a conflict that has claimed millions of lives, it really was a beacon of hope. But now talks in Washington, D.C. have highlighted a major lack of progress. Key steps, like the withdrawal of Rwandan troops from the DRC, which is a critical first step to build any kind of trust, still haven't happened. The whole deal is now at risk of complete collapse, which just shows you how incredibly hard it is to turn a signature on a piece of paper into actual peace on the ground. Let's move to see how this global pressure is impacting the very structure of governments and societies, from constitutional changes to legal battles over human rights. All this external pressure, from economic shocks to military threats, it creates these deep fractures inside countries. We're going to look at how the very rules of democracy are being challenged and, in some cases, completely rewritten. In Europe, a major policy clash. The EU's top court has struck down Italy's controversial plan for offshore migrant centers, a significant blow to their migration strategy. Italy's plan was basically to move asylum seekers and their legal cases to centers in Albania, outside its own borders. But the EU court said, nope, you can't do that. They declared the whole system incompatible with European Union law. And this isn't just a simple legal ruling. It's a fundamental test of what the EU is all about. It pits one nation's desire to control its borders against the bloc's shared laws and human rights standards. It's a tension you see all across Europe today. In Central America, a fundamental democratic rule has been changed, allowing the popular current president to run for re-election indefinitely. The National Assembly in El Salvador just voted to get rid of presidential term limits entirely. This move paves the way for the current, and very popular, president to run for re-election forever, theoretically. So the crucial point is, this raises a big question, and this is it. Is this the path to a stronger nation, or does it create a weaker democracy? Critics worry this consolidates power and weakens democratic institutions, while supporters argue it provides stability.
People who support the move say, look, it brings stability. Why should we get rid of a popular, effective leader just because of some arbitrary rule? But critics see a classic and very dangerous slippery slope. They argue that term limits are like a guardrail, put there specifically to prevent one person from getting too much power, no matter how popular they are. It's this constant tension between what the people want right now and the long-term health of the institutions that are supposed to protect everyone. And sometimes, this tension doesn't stay in the debate hall.
A new report from Bangladesh reveals a deadly month of political clashes and mob attacks, with 25 people killed, highlighting deep and dangerous divisions. This isn't an abstract argument anymore. 25 people were killed in just 1 month because of political clashes and mob violence. It's a frightening sign that civil conversation is broken down, and it points to a slide into wider instability.
But sometimes the system holds. This final verdict is seen as a major test of the rule of law in a complex region, reinforcing legal accountability for powerful figures. In Bosnia, a high court upheld the conviction of a very powerful Bosnian Serb political leader on charges of corruption and nationalism. For a place still healing from the deep wounds of ethnic war, this is a huge moment. Holding a powerful figure accountable, especially for divisive nationalism, is a critical test. It sends a message that the justice system, in this case, can stand above the political and ethnic divisions that have haunted the country for decades. From the political to the planetary, we now turn to the relationship between humanity and the natural world, a story of new dangers and remarkable innovation. We zoom out from the pressures on our political systems to the pressures on our planetary one. And this is a story of a constant push and pull, really. It's about new dangers, for sure, but it's also about incredible human ingenuity and our race to find solutions. In Japan, a rise in bear attacks is linked by experts to climate change and rural depopulation, forcing wildlife and humans into closer, more dangerous contact. We start with this question that might seem small, but it reveals a global trend. Bear attacks are up in Japan. Why? Well, experts say it's a perfect storm. First, climate change is messing with the bears' food sources in the mountains. At the same time, Japan's countryside is aging and depopulating, so that buffer zone between the wilderness and our towns is shrinking. The result? Hungry bears and unsuspecting people are crossing paths more and more often. This human-wildlife conflict is one symptom of a planet under stress, alongside extreme weather warnings in South Africa. But humanity is also developing incredible new tools like Pakistan's new satellite and Japan's autonomous sub to understand and manage these changes. On the very same day, South Africa is bracing for severe weather. But even as these challenges grow, so does our ingenuity. Pakistan just launched a new satellite, an eye in the sky to help manage its water resources. And thousands of miles away, a Japanese robotic sub just did something for the first time ever. It's explored the dark, unknown waters underneath an Antarctic ice shelf, gathering priceless data. It really is a global race between the problems and the solutions. And this brilliantly illustrates human ingenuity. South African scientists are using nuclear science to make rhino horns radioactive, a creative way to dismantle illegal trafficking and save an endangered species. Seriously, this is one of the most creative solutions I've seen. Scientists in South Africa are using nuclear physics to fight poaching. It's called the Rhizotope Project. They inject a tiny, harmless, radioactive particle into a rhino's horn. It doesn't hurt the rhino at all, but it makes that horn a huge liability for traffickers because it will set off radiation detectors at ports and airports all over the world. Suddenly, that priceless horn becomes a toxic asset that's too risky to smuggle. It's a genius way to disrupt the supply chain. For our final section, we look at how society grapples with truth, from fighting misinformation to navigating the complex intersection of celebrity, justice, and the right to protest. After looking at the pressures on economies, governments, and the planet, we end with the pressure on the one thing that holds it all together: truth. This is about the daily struggle for accountability, from fighting simple misinformation to how our legal systems handle justice. First, the fight for facts. NASA had to step in to debunk a viral hoax about a global darkness, showing the constant need to defend against scientific misinformation. A hoax claiming a solar eclipse was about to cause global darkness went so viral that NASA itself had to issue a public correction. They had to explain,
no, that's not happening, and that the rumor probably got mixed up with a real eclipse happening in 2027. It might seem like a silly thing, but it shows you how in our world, a baseless rumor can travel way farther and faster than a simple fact, forcing our most trusted scientific institutions to play defense. At the same time, justice systems are being tested. French prosecutors are pushing for a high-profile trial against a football star, while in Sydney, a court balanced the right to protest with concerns about public order. In France, prosecutors have officially requested that football superstar Achraf Hakimi stand trial on rape charges. This puts the core principle of equal justice for all right under the intense spotlight of global celebrity. And on the other side of the planet, a court in Australia made a different kind of tough call. It approved a pro-Palestinian march across the Sydney Harbour Bridge, even though police warned it would cause huge disruptions. It's a perfect example of that difficult balancing act courts have to perform, weighing the fundamental right to protest against the need to maintain public order.
From the global economy to the skills of justice, these are the interconnected events of the day. So from one number in a US jobs report, we've traced this whole web of consequences that touches everything from international trade and war to the very definition of law, and even how we use science. These aren't just separate stories. They're all interconnected parts of one single unfolding narrative of a world under a whole lot of pressure. We sincerely hope that by bringing you just the facts, we've empowered you to form your own clear understanding. Our ability to deliver this is thanks to listeners like you. If you value this approach, follow us on Insta at World OneRead and share this with everyone you know. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with more headlines for you tomorrow morning at 800 GMT. Until then, keep smiling and making this world a better place for everyone. And remember to follow us on Spotify and YouTube to listen to this podcast every morning at 8 a.m. GMT.